Guys, welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Property Buyer. Today we have Nathan Prasad on with us. He's one of Brisbane's top property buyers. So if you're looking for a property in Brisbane, you might want to listen up. How are you today, Nathan?
Hey Nathan, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty excited to get some more videos up and share it with the world.
That's exciting. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, can you share a little bit about your background and what makes you passionate in property?
So I guess like leaving high school, I was really motivated to buy my first home. I didn't really have any understanding on how to work out value and everything like that, but I just knew I wanted to buy property. So I saved up a deposit, and I was able to buy my first place when I was 21.
Yeah.
Fast forward a year after owning it, I thought, hey, I'm going to, remortgage it and use some of that as equity to buy the next property. That's when I found out that I've actually got the most expensive property in that suburb. So I didn't really work out. So I was like, damn, I'm not going to be able to build out this portfolio. But then I dived into, just reading books on property and understanding how to flip property and also, looking at how people develop property and make money from it. And that further, made me more excited about it. Sort of fast forward, I held it for another year, and lucky the market grew, and I was able to then sell it for another 40 grand. I'd done a $5,000 renovation on it, but then I was able to sell it for another 40 grand. On top of that. So then, my initial deposit of, I think it was around 15,000 on that time, grew and I paid the debt down. So then I had 60 grand. And then I done the total opposite from there. I went and brought the oldest, crappiest house as close as possible to the CBD. And,
smart move.
done a renovation there. And from there, I was able to then, sell that one for 400 grand more than what I purchased it for. So that initial 60 grand then changed into 400. But but through that process, I then started helping investors buy properties and I've bought a few more properties myself. But that's really started. I was just really like, hey, I'm leaving school, I want to go buy my first home. And then I started to understand, wow, you can actually make, you can actually use like property as a vehicle to triple or double that cash that you save from your job, because it's going to be really hard to save, take you forever to try to save 400K. So that's why I'm really passionate about property, because, it's such a good vehicle for people.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So how did your first client as a property buyer, the buyer's agent, did it come organically, or did you have to, did it just like rock up on your plate? did they just come to you? Did they see, or did you have to go searching for it?
So when I first started off, I was already working as a building estimator. So I was working as a building estimator. Wow. I brought my first home, and then I was really kind of getting bored of, doing the 9 to 5. So I was going to the same office. It got up to year 6. And the role wasn't as exciting. So what I did was I started the buyer's agency as a bit of a side hustle to get started. Yeah. And then, my first clients, they were developers, because I was already in that building space. So I was finding development sites in Holland Park and in Camp Hill and Mount Gravatt. And I was finding them off market and then taking them to the developers. And that's where I learned so much more about, how to negotiate. If you really want to learn how to negotiate, you bring these deals to these developers. They will run you through, what to look out for, and the biggest thing, they'll teach you how to negotiate. Especially these guys that have been, buying sites for the last 5 years. They definitely know all the little tricks of the trades to save, hundreds of thousands on property purchases, and also what to look out for when you go to buying property. So that was sort of my introduction into becoming a buyer's agent.
Yeah, nice. Well, that means that you would have been. For those people that are going out to be buyers agents, you would have been head and shoulders above them, like with experience and that sort of thing. So you knew, you could really tell if a property was going to be like the price people were listing them at, or
And like that then moved into the next phase where I started helping investors. And this
Yeah.
is where when you could buy, a development site with a 5% yield. So this is going back in, say, 2019. I was picking up houses on, 800 square meter plus blocks out in like Arana Hills within 12 kilometers. We were picking them up. I was picking them up for, say, 500K, and they were renting for 500 per week. And then that was the next phase of my buyer's agency. I was buying holds with the development value add.
Yeah.
For clients.
Yeah. Wow. So you're a property evaluator, is that right?
Before I was a building estimator.
But building estimator. So is that like a property valuer sort of thing, or an estimator for yeah?
So the company was Plantation Homes. So you might have
nice,
heard of them. Yep. So essentially,
my wife loves that one.
Yeah, they got the big nice display homes. I really enjoyed working there. It just became very repetitive over time.
Yeah.
But essentially, you go into the display home, then you pick the design that you like, and then essentially I will get your plans, your land, and then I would work out how much would it cost to put that house on that block of land. So it was that's where I learned about looking at the contours and retaining walls and soil reports, and that's the stuff that's probably like way too advanced for just finding a buy and hold is where I'm at the moment. But it just gave me a really good understanding of.
But there is but with new house on land, there is a big variance and there's a big unknown there. They don't know how long projects are going to take, especially with the cost of building materials and that going all over the place, and so understanding that you look at something that's an established building and it'd be a little bit more
de-risking the whole situation. I think the best one of the best stories that really whenever you're going to buy a block of land or you're going to find somewhere that you want to develop, I would highly recommend getting a soil test done. So I remember when I was an estimator, this family bought a block of land. It was, backed onto the water, so there's already a bit of an alarm bell scene, but they didn't do a soil report. So they went to go put their dream home on this block. And then when I went to go do, I got the soil report done, and then I went to go estimate how much it will cost to put a slab on it. I think it was around 3 meters down, there was actually a water table. So they had to then do screw pairs past that water table. So long story short, it ended up costing them an extra $150,000 on just on screw pairs, and then they had to put the slab. So then they went and then they got my quote, and it was 2 days after they went unconditional. So they were already unconditional on this block. So then they ended up just going from this big high set to this low set. But getting a soil test done that would have cost $2,000 probably could have saved them a whole lot of heartache.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a crazy story. So that's a good segue to the next question too. Like, what's been like one of the most significant challenges you've faced in your property journey, like as a buyer's agent? And I'm thinking in light of buyers that are watching this podcast, really looking for they want to know where to start.
I could probably share. When I went to go buy,
share all your secrets.
I guess when I went to go buy my other, 2 more properties really quickly, I didn't account for the interest rates to go up. So now when I'm talking to clients and they really want to go for this really growth style property, I'm trying to pull them back a bit, and I'm trying to focus a bit more on cash flow. So if you're starting out as an investor, really look at the cash flow. It can really like bleed you essentially if you don't run the numbers properly. And also, one big misconception that I've learned over the last 3 years is that, you think, I get all my capital growth being within 10 kilometers of the CBD. But with a lot of the deals that I've done, and I've purchased 2 properties and, at the same time, just for example, I purchased a property in Cannon Hill for $800K. This was not last year, the year before. And then I purchased another property in Crestmead for 370K.
Uh-huh.
The one in Cannon Hill went up to 1 million, and the one in Crestmead went up to 530. So they both went up 200K. But from like a percentage point of view, the one in Crestmead went up like almost doubled in price.
Yeah, wow.
So you can get that growth if you go 30Ks out and you do your research. You don't need to go inner city all the time.
Yeah. So, which areas are you focusing on now? Like, if someone was to come to you, and are you Australia wide?
Not at the moment. I definitely, with Brisbane the way that it's going, 5% yields are getting really, really tough to get now. I could see, towards the end of the year, it's going to be near impossible. I'm starting to build out, teams across, other smaller capital cities like Toowoomba, Bundaberg, Townsville, and Perth, just so then I can help a lot of the clients that I've already purchased in Brisbane get their next property in an area that may not have as much capital growth, but it will give them that rental yield, and it should balance out their property portfolio.
Yeah. So do you help people build that, like strategize and build out their portfolios, not just buy one? Is that
So when somebody jumps on with me, I want to sit down and look at what sort of properties do they have at the moment, and also it's more so acting like a soundboard. There's platforms online that I can use, and we can really make it visual. So we can say, hey, maybe we'll buy, you've got one capital growth style property now. We'll plug in another capital growth style property, like something in Brisbane. And then I'd say maybe the third one, we might go out to a smaller, a smaller capital city, but there is a lot of prospects for growth.
Yeah.
And because it all depends on people's servicing. And then after that, we can then, maybe focus on an even smaller property deal. But I do sit down with people and help them, brainstorm the portfolio that suits them and their lifestyle.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure it's really emotional, and everyone's got different expectations. So
I find a lot of people from Sydney and Melbourne are buying an investment property in Brisbane with the plan to move into it. So there's always that emotional aspect to it. I've found recently. I always think it's quite funny because I always, sort of ask them, is this, something you want to move into? They say, no, it's just an investment. And then later on down the track, they said, yeah, we're actually planning on moving there in the next 2 to 3 years. And at first, I only heard it the first couple of times, but now I swear it's like every, second person from Melbourne's relocating up here for the weather.
Yeah, wow. So I'm guessing you'd be finding a lot of perfect kitchens and things like that. Yeah, it seems to be a thing. Is that so what would you tell a first-time home buyer or investor about the process of buying to gain advantage over other buyers, and what might be some of the misconceptions that they have?
I'd probably always say to a first-home buyer, just sit down with a mortgage broker and run through all your numbers, so you can understand what your repayments are going to be, and the second part would be to jump on and do your research, on the different suburbs and where, like, we believe there's going to be some growth, because once you've narrowed down on the suburb, the third thing is that's when you engage a buyer's agent, is really to finding an area that's a bit tricky, but it's not too hard. The hardest part of it is actually snagging a deal. So you can get real crystal clear on the suburb that you want to target. You can then grab all the real estate agents' details, throw them onto like an email list, email blast them every week, because that first property you get, it's really important that you get a lot of growth from that, because that property is going to be the leverage for you to get your next property, because it's super hard to save up another deposit. So you really want to be smart about it, and you want to make sure that first property you get, you can just be like, cool, I'm going to move into this. You might just sell it and then buy a bigger asset, but you want to sort of go into it with the idea of, hey, how can we add value to this property? How can we extract as much value so we can leverage it and move into a bigger asset sooner?
Yeah. I saw a stat the other day. It says the average Australian takes about 10 years to save up for their first home deposit now. So yeah.
Especially now, like I went to Aldi the other day and I got like one, and this is Aldi. They're like, oh, we're doing a small shop, and then it ended up being $70, and the guy behind the counter even laughed as well. It's like the cost of living is just going to rise, and you're seeing rents are driving up. So over time, you know, it's just going to be harder and harder to save that deposit. So if you've got an asset that's hedging against inflation, at least you're like, for me, when I was 21, it was like forced savings. I was like, once I had that property, I paid it down, but that property grew in value. So then it was essentially helping me, you know, save in an easier way, because it's you're forced. You always pay your bills first.
I totally agree with you there. So yeah, get it. So like that, like real estate agents like to tell us, it's the best time to buy is today.
Yeah. Just don't overpay. Like I could not stress that enough. I seen that when the market was like really, you know, hot. People were, you know, overpaying on properties. So once you find it, just, you know, property is forgiving, but it can be a super expensive mistake if you overpay. You know, something could happen and you need to sell the place, but you can't sell it for the amount you purchased it for. It's going to put you in a really, really bad position. So, you know, make sure once you find a property, you check your comparables, you call up local agents, get their thoughts. A lot of the times they're pretty good, and they'll give you an idea whether you're overpaying or not.
Yeah. Okay. When people come to you, what's some of the misconceptions that property buyers might have? Like I hear a lot of people go to like buyers agents to get off market properties, that sort of thing. You know, so what do you see there?
I think with investors, I tend to buy a lot of off market deals because that's when we're able to get the value a lot lower. But with families, I do say to them, hey, I'm going to, you know, find you as many properties which are on the market, but also off market. But I always say to them, there's a very, very high chance the property that you really like will come up online, and you'll turn around and you'll say to me, can you just get this under contract for me? So, you know, there's this big misconception of the buyer's agent's going to, you know, save you all this money. But at the same time, you know, there was one that I got in Wynnum last year, the family that relocated, and, you know, I found them a really, really good off market. And they turned around and they said, oh, the wife didn't like it because the yard wasn't big enough. And it was absolutely crazy because it was so cheap. But then the one that she really liked was a much older house. But, you know, they were going to pay the same amount for it. But they just turned around and said, Nathan, do whatever you can to get this under contract. And we won it by exactly $1,000. So I went 1.3330, 1,000. So if you're ever going in to put an offer, always try to add in, you know, an extra $1,000 or 500. And the agent literally sent us the two, our offer and the other offer, and he said you won by exactly $1,000. So
yeah, nice.
Yeah,
and that's so good.
So that's probably the biggest misconception is like when you engage a buyer's agent, it's just finding off markets, but it's more so when you find that dream property you want, and there's, you know, 30 people at the open home, and, you know, there's 5 of them putting in an offer. What are you going to do that's going to make you stand out from the other buyers?
Yeah. So that raises a good, interesting question. So, how do you feel like your negotiation skills have gone over the last few years? You've been like a buyer's agent. Do you think that's made it easier to deal with sales agents?
Yeah, 100%. So, you know, when it comes to negotiating, the first part is really understanding value around the property. So over time, you sort of craft your skill around how to work out a value for a property. You also look at where the value is at now, and you want to look at where the value may be in 30 days. And then you grab all that information to then decide, hey, how much should we pay for that property? So that's probably the biggest portion when you're going online and you're fighting against other agents. And then you sort of, once you're talking to the agent, you just want to start stacking things against like I like calling it stacking. So you're building up the relationship with the agent. Hopefully you've worked with them before, so then they can give you some inside intel. Second thing, if it's an investment property, you want to then say, hey, like, you give them the management. That's another thing you can stack on top of it.
Wow.
Another aspect is outlining why you're such a good buyer. So attaching a story to your contract.
Yeah.
And then adding some sort of pressure. So so when you go to negotiate, you just keep stacking all these different components. That then drives your contract ahead. So like I just got one under contract, and it was an off-market property in Marrickaville East, and we weren't the highest offer. But I attached a story around we're not going to play any games when it comes to the building and pests, which we didn't. It's going to be smooth sailing. Already knew the agent, so that allowed us to get the property for $20,000 less because the seller needs it to settle on that date. So the other buyers were just sort of fresh. So it can literally save you tens of thousands if you implement the right strategy.
That's awesome. That's gold there, I reckon, because a contract is only as good as the person behind it, and if you're sort of bringing life to that contract, So I guess you're sort of saying there that it comes down to relationships. And the paper exists, like the contract's there, but the relationship will make that contract stand up.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Relationships and persuasion to the agent. You got to persuade them why you're the better option, and you sort of develop that over time because you lose some and it hurts. And you go back to the drawing board. Not like your normal buyer will do this maybe 3-4 times over their life, but when you're negotiating on deals on a monthly basis, you're constantly going back and reiterating the way that you negotiated, and you fine tune it.
Yeah. So pain's a great teacher. Pain's the best teacher. So I think it's definitely not something they teach you at school, is it? What's the best way for people to find you? Maybe see what you're all about.
Yeah, if anyone wanted to go to the website, it's envisionproperty.com.au, and they can jump on there, and I post a lot of the property deals that I do on my Facebook page, so they can just scroll through and they can see, what sort of deals I'm doing. Otherwise, they could just
seen that. Like you got I had a quick look at your website, and some of the deals and on there are pretty crazy. Like
they're just
you wonder, how do you do that? Check out envisionproperty.com.au. That's it's worth having a look at to see what's really possible. With an experienced buyer, to get yourself ahead of the market.
Sure. And you can also just Google. Hopefully, something good comes up. But just either just reach out on social media or go to the website if you want to get in touch. And happy to jump on a call and run you through my thoughts on Brisbane at the time, and hopefully it gives you. Steers you in the right direction. Yeah,
no worries. Well, thanks for popping on, Nathan. It's been really good to see how you think about property and how we can get ahead with you. I hope to catch you in person sometime.